Well, good evening, everyone. AFR is now back on your radio. Jay Smith, Bradley Kendall, Evan McDowell. It's the AFR guys here to talk some college football with you on this fine Monday evening before Thanksgiving. Bradley is actually back in Charlotte, North Carolina. He has already gone home for Thanksgiving break, so it is just Evan and I in the studios with you this evening, but we've got Bradley on the phone lines with us. It's time to deliver the line, Bradley, after further review.
After further review, this is weird. I will probably be the longest caller we ever have on this show. We've had some long calls in the past, but by far will be the longest one we have. But after further review, I think it's really arguable that Clemson in the last 4 years has accomplished more than South Carolina ever has in football. I think it's very, very arguable, and South Carolina fans are going to hate to hear that because they've been around for 126 years, but Clemson's been great the last 4 years.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. We will definitely get into the South Carolina Clemson talk later in the show. Obviously got a lot planned for that conversation, but we do want to review, Evan, some big games week 12. I think the biggest game that stood out to me was Notre Dame and their performance against Syracuse. After Dungey went out in the first half, they basically couldn't do anything offensively, didn't even score a touchdown. Final score in this one, Notre Dame 36, Syracuse 3. What was your biggest takeaway? I mean, does this prove that, because remember how much Clemson has struggled against Syracuse these last couple of years and limiting Dungey, and I know that he was out most of the game, but does this validate Notre Dame as a legit team to contend in the playoff?
I think to an extent it does because, I mean, we know Syracuse isn't a bad team, and it is unfortunate that they didn't have Dungey for the entire contest, but I really don't think that would have made that big of a difference anyway. I think Notre Dame was the better team, and I think with Dungey, Syracuse could have kept it close, but I think at the end of the day, Notre Dame still would have won but obviously not by the margin that they did. But I think that the resiliency that they showed and the fact that, sometimes, the backup quarterback can come in and throw off your game plan, obviously it didn't faze the Irish very much. I think they pretty much asserted themselves as long as they beat Southern Cal this week. I'm pretty sure they asserted themselves as a playoff team this past week. Bradley, are you arguing with me about that?
I don't think it's going to matter whether you validate them or not because, look at that. Like you said, Evan, they're playing Southern Cal, who's, 5-6 this year? So they're going to get in the playoff. It's going to happen. Now, whether we think they're capable of beating Clemson, that's a story for another time. But, I don't think Syracuse with Dungey would have scored 36 points anyway. The margin just would have been a little less. So, yeah, I think this kind of stamps Notre Dame into the playoff. And I think right now, you can pencil them in as the team to beat right now in that Orange Bowl because we still got to see Clemson play the last few weeks. So, great win. Ian Book looked fantastic. They're honestly one of the most balanced teams in America right now, and they got a lot to play for coming up.
Yeah, Ian Book, he threw for 292 yards and a pair of touchdowns. I did think that this quote from Syracuse head coach Dino Babers in his post-game press conference was pretty telling. Because Syracuse has played both Clemson and Notre Dame, and he said, "I'll tell you this, quote, Notre Dame is better than what people think they are. That's a really, really good football team. Clemson, however, is extremely talented, so I think there's no doubt those two teams are in the top 4 in the country," end quote. So, Evan, it sounds like Babers is saying, hey, Notre Dame can contend with anyone, and you shouldn't write them off just because they don't play in a conference.
Well, and he would know. He's played both Clemson and Notre Dame this year. He's had firsthand experience against both of those squads, and if he thinks that Notre Dame can't compete with Clemson, then I got no reason to doubt him because they've looked good. They're undefeated, and like I said, he's game planned for both. He knows both now. I feel like if he thinks that Notre Dame is on the same playing field as Clemson, it's probably a pretty close gap then.
I think one of the interesting, before we move on, one of the last points I wanted to make about this, about Notre Dame specifically, it's interesting little statistic here. Irish have not won at USC, Southern Cal, who they play next week for the Battle of the Jewel Shillelagh rivalry game. They haven't won at USC since 2012. When they went to the BCS National Championship and got obliterated by Alabama. Obliterated by Alabama. Is there a little bit of, do they have to kind of have won there in 6 years?
I don't think they really have to worry about that this year just because the margin between how good Notre Dame is and how lackluster Southern Cal has been. Since Darnold is gone, they're they're not even competitive in the Pac-12, much less against the number 3 team in the country. So I think that streak is probably going to come to an end. I think Notre Dame does win on Saturday. It might be close because, like I say, it's a rivalry game.
Sure,
Anything can happen, but I don't think they have to worry very much about going out to Pasadena and then losing this week.
Well, moving on now, Michigan played Indiana this past weekend, beat them 31-20. Struggled a little bit. Did hold the Hoosiers to 3 points in the second half. Bradley, Shea Patterson went 16 for 28 for 250 yards with only 1 touchdown. What do you make of his performance? Should the Wolverines kind of be a little skeptical now going into a big game against Ohio State, or do you think they have it in the bag? Because I know in the past you haven't been as high on the Wolverines.
I have not, but I've had to give Shea Patterson his due from what he's done this past season. I don't think you look too much into this Indiana game. Remember, Indiana's given a couple of good teams a run for their money. Ohio State earlier in the year, in the past they've played teams pretty well this particular part of the season. So, not a terrible team they ended up facing against, and it's cold. They're looking ahead to that Ohio State game. So you probably didn't expect Michigan to come out and play their A game. But I think Patterson is more than capable of leading Michigan to beat Ohio State. I'm going to pick Michigan to win that game. We'll get into that more later. But right now, I think, like Notre Dame, I think Michigan's a very, very balanced team with a great defense. And 20 points is honestly more than a lot of teams would have probably put up against Michigan. One other quick note I want to throw in real quick. Back to Notre Dame. What's crazy? Notre Dame has actually not given up more than 23 points all season.
Wow.
Which I thought was kind of unbelievable to think about. Michigan and Notre Dame, a lot more similar than people might think right now.
Yeah, and I think the latest predictions don't have those teams matching up in the semifinals. They have Notre Dame playing Clemson in the Orange Bowl, and then Alabama would be playing Michigan. And I would imagine that both Notre Dame and Michigan would not be favored in those matchups, Evan, but it does present an interesting other scenario besides the Clemson-Alabama mantra that everyone just keeps regurgitating.
Yeah, it does throw a little variety into the mix. 2 teams that haven't made the playoff yet, and I think, at least from my Clemson fans' perspective, that's kind of my perfect top 4. That's what I want it to stay right now because I like the way Clemson matches up against Notre Dame. I think the defense can limit Ian Book, and I think our offense could potentially overpower that Notre Dame defense that has been playing pretty well. And I think Michigan, other than Clemson, might be the best team matchup-wise against Alabama. They've got the defense that you would hope could, limit Tua Tagovailoa and that tied offense a little bit. And if Shea Patterson is on top of his game, if Karan Higdon can get it going on the ground, you could see Michigan, potentially put up some points against a semi-vulnerable Alabama defense that we've seen. So I think if Clemson and Alabama were to inevitably meet in the national championship again, I think having to go through Notre Dame and Michigan would be a good way to do that. And worst case scenario, both teams lose, you get a Michigan-Notre Dame rematch. Both teams playing much better now than they were week 1. I think that could make for an interesting national championship as well.
Well, switching over now to the Big 12, we had a West Virginia team drop a game against Oklahoma State this weekend. 45-41 in favor of the Cowboys was the final score. It definitely eliminated West Virginia from playoff contention. They're now 8-2 overall, 6-2 in their conference. They do have the opportunity this Friday when they face Oklahoma to reach the Big 12 title game with a win. After the game against Oklahoma State, head coach Dana Holgerson said that he felt like they left about 14 points out there on the field. I don't know. I mean, it feels like a wasted opportunity for West Virginia, Evan, even though they haven't necessarily been in the playoff conversation these last couple weeks. They still could have easily been in a New Year's Six.
I think so, too. And there's always a possibility that they still could. I mean, you'd have to win back-to-back matchups against Oklahoma, which isn't looking likely right now. But, West Virginia could, if I'm trying to be optimistic from a Mountaineer point of view, you could still affect the playoff scenario in that, let's say you beat Oklahoma maybe 1 out of the 2 times that you have to play them. Well, then Big 12's out of playoff contention as well. So still an opportunity for West Virginia to cause some mayhem, and I don't think that they would have made the playoff anyway because I don't think they beat Oklahoma twice. But it is kind of a shame to see them have to lose a game that they weren't supposed to lose, and you really wanted to see them in Oklahoma at their best, at least for that first matchup, because now it's kind of like, well, I don't really have a lot of faith in West Virginia to come out and beat Oklahoma even one time, so you could see the Sooners knocking on the door of the playoff at this point.
Possibly so. Bradley, what do you make of the fact that this is the first time Oklahoma State has beaten top 10s in back-to-back home games? I mean, does that Are they kind of like an under-the-radar team that, I mean, yes, they didn't have a number next to their name in this matchup. They weren't ranked. They're 6-5, which, is kind of unassuming, but they're still able to contend with top-tier teams.
Oh, I mean, yeah, if you're going to pick the perfect team to spoil anyone's season in that conference in particular, it's going to be Oklahoma State. I mean, they're capable of putting up, like we've seen, 50 points a game any given night. Cornelius can just throw it all around the field. So, and I think when you look at between West Virginia and Oklahoma, honestly, even with that extra loss for West Virginia, they're really not that much different. Because if you remember a couple weeks ago, Oklahoma was a point away from losing to Oklahoma State. So Oklahoma State's played spoiler pretty much all season. And I think West Virginia's going to need those 14 points back that they let go to beat Oklahoma. But right now, I mean, I think it's going to be in the 40s in that particular matchup. And I could see it coming down to a last-second play. So I think both teams are still relatively the same when you look at it right now. I mean, Oklahoma just gave up 40 to Kansas. Come on now, 40 to Kansas. So, yeah, I mean, it's first team to 50 is going to win.
Evan, you're still going with, and I think you predicted this at the beginning of the season, Bradley and I had West Virginia. You're still going with Oklahoma in the regular season and possibly conference championship matchup. You think they're going to beat them 2-0?
I don't know if they beat West Virginia twice because, I mean, Will Greer is capable of tossing it around the yard.
And it's a road game.
And it is a road game, but I still like Oklahoma. I think they're the more complete team, and Kyler Murray is a baller, and he's gonna be hard to stop as well. So you figure if Cornelius can go off for 5 touchdowns through the air against that West Virginia defense, I can't wait to see what Kyler Murray does with his arm and with his feet. So I'm going to stick with the Sooners for now. I think it's a safer pick.
Oklahoma, and I think if it's a shootout, which it's the Big 12, so it's going to be a shootout. That's just assumed. If it's a shootout, it's going to favor Oklahoma. I agree with you there. What's really telling when you look at the Sooners, they have only scored under 30 points once, and that was against Army. An Army team, they beat 28-21, who is now ranked, I want to say, for the first time in the AP poll since it was like 1996. I saw that today. They've scored 55, 48, 51, 51, 52 in their last 5 games. Offensively, no questions. Obviously, the defensive side of the ball is a whole nother ball game, but at least within the Big 12, defense really doesn't matter as much.
No, it doesn't. And looking back on Oklahoma's just their last 5 games, they've scored 55, 48, 51, 51, 52.
Yeah.
So, like you say, first 1 to 50 wins. Right now, the line is a 1.5. Oklahoma's just barely favored. This game's essentially a toss-up. So this is going to be a really fun one, I think. And, if West Virginia wins this week at home, that could carry over to next week to the championship game. And, I mean, you could see some momentum start to build. West Virginia could mess around and win the Big 12. But like I said, I think at this point with the way both of them are playing and with the way Kyler Murray and that Oklahoma offense is just balling out, I think the Sooners are still a safer pick. But obviously, I don't think they make the playoffs.
I'm not going to change my pick. I'm going to go with West Virginia going to win this one in the regular season. I do think, however, in the Big 12 championship, Oklahoma will probably prevail. Bradley, you agree? You disagree? What's your thoughts?
Over-under is 82 right now for this game. I would absolutely take the over. I mean, you're going to say that each team scores over 40. You're already right over that margin right there. I think both teams do split. You talk about how Oklahoma's only given up. They've only scored less than 30 points once this season. Well, so has West Virginia. They've been right on par with them offensively. And I think if you take, Will Greer against Oklahoma State, under 50% completion percentage, and he gets a little bit over that, they win that game. You talked about how Cornelius was able to light up West Virginia's defense. Well, he did the same thing to Oklahoma. So, you put Will Greer in that mix, I think you're talking about a very similar situation here. So, I think, the first team has scored 50 wins. I think West Virginia probably scores over 50 this time around, and Oklahoma gets it the second time around. So, I think they do end up splitting, and Oklahoma gets the better of them in the Big 12 championship game.
Either way, I think all three of us agree that both of these games you definitely want to pencil into the calendar and tune in, because I think if you like points and everyone likes points, you probably need to be watching this late season matchup here in the Big 12 and then obviously the Big 12 championship game. Let's switch gears now and go out of the Power 5, looking at UCF and what was probably the last great hurdle for back-to-back undefeated seasons for the Knights. They are sitting now at 10-0 after a 38-13 win over Cincinnati Bearcats. Evan, this was a pretty decisive victory. I think in a lot of ways it proved that UCF can play.
Yeah, and I think this was the perfect opportunity for them to do so. I mean, you're on a national stage. You got College Game Day in town. You have Fowler and Herbstreit calling the game. So this was, if there was ever a time for UCF to put on a show and kind of establish themselves as, hey, we're here, we're not messing around, this was the game to do it. I still think from the playoff picture, they are definitely on the outside looking in. And, I mean, they still have to play South Florida coming up this week. That is a rivalry of sorts, and that's going to be a fun American Athletic Conference atmosphere. And then they still have the American Championship game. So you still got two potential opportunities to fall. But, I mean, if they play like they did against Cincinnati, I have a hard time believing that South Florida or whoever they play in the American Championship game could beat this team. So you're looking at another New Year's Six Bowl against maybe like an LSU or somebody like that at this point.
Do you think, and I'm curious, I want to get both of your opinions on this because, and I know it's a little early, but this UCF program reminds me of a certain blue-colored program from the mid-2000s.
They don't happen to play on a blue field, do they?
They do. Boise State, and here's the interesting thing, guys. In 1996, Boise State went 2-10. The following year, they were 4-7. Then in 1999, they had their first 10-win season. They went 10-3, and throughout the rest of the 2000s, up until 2000 really and 12, they had 9, 10, 12, 14-win seasons with only singular losses. A couple seasons they had 3 or 4 losses, but overall they were extremely consistent and they were always to be reckoned with. UCF, if I'm not mistaken, had a winless season a few years back. I can't remember the exact year.
It was year before last.
It was the okay.
They went from winless to undefeated under Scott Frost. It was a quick turnaround.
Does this UCF team have the pieces in place to string together a run like we saw from Boise State?
I would have a hard time saying no right now because you've seen the coaching change with Scott Frost obviously leaving for Nebraska, and they're picking up right where they left off. They're sitting at 11-0, and they're looking down the barrel of another undefeated season in New Year's Six Bowl. Kind of similar to what Boise State did with, Jared Zabransky, Ian Johnson in the backfield for, that Sugar Bowl against Oklahoma, and then later on with Kellen Moore setting NCAA quarterback records, Doug Martin as a running back. Boise State produced some really good NFL caliber players. I think UCF could do the same thing. I'm not quite ready to say they're on that same stage just because I'd like to see them prove themselves against a better New Year's Six Bowl opponent this year as opposed to 3-loss Auburn last year, which Auburn wasn't a bad team, and that was a great win for UCF. But let's put you up against an Oklahoma, whoever the 5 team is, whoever's the last team to not make the playoff outside looking in. Let's put them in UCF in a New Year's Six Bowl and let's see what happens.
They obviously have to perform, Bradley, in bowl games. I think it's interesting though when you look at Boise State in the mid-2000s and their performance in bowl games. Yes, everyone remembers the Statue of Liberty play in the Fiesta Bowl against Oklahoma to win it in overtime in 2006, but they lost Liberty Bowl in 2004. They lost the MPC Computers Bowl in 2005. They lost, some bowl games. I mean, yes, they did win a couple Fiesta Bowls, but overall they weren't that impressive in postseason play. So what are your thoughts here on UCF?
I think UCF's got every piece in play to make a run like Boise State. I really do. I think with Mackenzie Milton as a junior, he comes back for one more season, you would anticipate. And you're looking at probably a potential another undefeated season right there. But remember, he's from Hawaii, so that shows they can recruit cross-country. Now, that was under Scott Frost. But then again, that's plucking a guy out from the same place as Tua Tagovailoa. So, I mean, the talent right there in the state of Florida alone is enough where UCF you'd think would be able to contend recruiting-wise to be able to sustain the success. And you got to imagine, while they're still in the American Conference, until we see another team kind of emerge like a Houston, they're going to be favored in pretty much every game in future seasons. And, we look at next season, they play Stanford. That's one marquee win right there. At Pittsburgh might be a big win. So I think, UCF is built to stay at least another 2 to 3 years if the coaching staff and the players they have now are able to stay in place.
It'll be an interesting program to watch, but we'll have to see how all that plays out. Got to cut to a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about a couple more games from this past weekend and then the Clemson, South Carolina game. That's next. Stick with us.
Brock here with Tom's Barbecue to say we are just as ready as you are for football season. Get game day ready with our full menu at the restaurant, or take some Tom's Barbecue to go to contribute to your tailgate experience. Nothing says game day like great food. Call ahead by Thursday and we will have you all set for the weekend. All you have to do is call 864-288-2652. We look forward to getting your tailgate queued up. Tom's Barbecue at the corner of Woodruff and Garnington in Greenville.
Vehicle repairs can be a painful experience, from shops that overcharge to mechanics who don't know what they're doing. My Garage by Essex, with over 100 years of combined experience, is that vehicle repair shop you've always wanted. Specializing in computer diagnostics and engine repairs with a strong focus on preventative and scheduled maintenance, suspensions, brakes, heating and cooling. Call or stop by My Garage by Essex on Highway 93 in Clemson, 633-5800.
Big O Dodge Chrysler Jeep Ram is your local family-owned automotive dealer in the upstate. Life, liberty, and happiness is what we're all about. Big O has a huge inventory of new and used vehicles at the lowest price. Cars, SUVs, minivans, Jeeps, and trucks, new and pre-owned. You name it, we've got it. Trust us to deliver your next vehicle today. Visit us online at bigododge.com or check us out in Greenville under that big American flag on the Motor Mile.
Does your home have wall cracks, uneven floors, or doors and windows that are sticking? These are all signs that a foundation problem is stealing value from your home. Call Canty Foundation Specialist at 475-1671. We know your home is your number one investment, and we can help protect it. Don't wait for a foundation problem to get worse. If you have sagging floors or cracks in your sheetrock, call Canty Foundation Specialist, 475-1671, or visit us at cantyfoundationsc.com.
M&L Mobile Home Supplies is the largest retail mobile home parts store in the upstate. They're your source for heat pumps, heating, and air replacement parts, doors, tubs, showers, vinyl windows, skirting, decks, water heaters, everything you need. And they'll install vapor barriers, insulated floors, ductwork, and heat pumps. For 32 years, the staff at M&L Mobile Home Supplies has served the upstate's mobile home needs. M&L Mobile Home Supplies, 1100 28 Bypass in Anderson, or online at mnlsupply.com. Electronics make a great Christmas gift. The ideal electronic gift is a Husqvarna robotic auto mower. The elves at Easley Lawn and Garden invite you to shop their selection of Husqvarna auto mowers in 6 different models for every type of lawn. A Husqvarna auto mower from Easley Lawn and Garden makes a great gift, and it leaves you with a beautiful looking lawn while allowing you to spend time opening up the rest of your gifts. Once you've purchased your Husqvarna auto mower Christmas gift from Easley Lawn and Garden, their team of elves can assist you in getting started. Husqvarna robotic mowers are the #1 selling auto mower worldwide, used in Europe for years, now taking the U.S. by storm. Fill your Christmas list with the Husqvarna auto mower from Easley Lawn and Garden, your local Husqvarna dealer for nearly 40 years. Veteran and family owned and operated, 312 South Pendleton Street, Easley. Online at easleylawn.com.
Electric City Signs and Neon. Over 50 years of sign design, fabrication, installation, and maintenance in the upstate. Specializing in neon, plastic, flex face, channel letter, and LED message signs, Electric City Signs is ready to serve you with the highest level of satisfaction. Have questions? No problem. Their experienced team will see your project through inception to installation. Professional sign services at the best price. It's got to be Electric City Signs and Neon. Visit electricitysigns.com or call 225-5351 today. Go Tigers!
Bradley Kendall, Evan McDowell, talking some college football with you this fine Monday evening. Thanksgiving is just around the corner. As a reminder, Bradley on the phone lines with us, joining us from the Queen City, Charlotte, North Carolina. And Bradley, before we went to break, we were talking about UCF maybe being the next Boise State. Here's another team that's consistently under the radar even when they shouldn't be. And that team I'm going to go with is the Citadel. They played Alabama this weekend, and they were tied with the Crimson Tide at halftime in Bryant-Denny Stadium. Now, obviously, the final score doesn't reflect how close that game actually was, 50-17 in favor of the Tide. They turned on the Jets this second half. But what do you make of the Citadel? I mean, it's a team that consistently plays, obviously, South Carolina and Clemson in-state opponents. They're in the FCS division. I mean, do they ever really get the respect that they deserve, you think?
I mean, I guess. I wouldn't look into this game too much. I mean, yes, they are. I'm looking at their schedule right now. They're, 4-5, 5-5.
Yeah,
so,
they're about 500.
I mean, yeah, it's pretty cool that you can say you were tying a team that was paying you millions of dollars to play up against you. If you want to comparatively look at it, UNC was up 31-zip on them at half. So, yeah, definitely not something for Nick Saban to smile about. I think it tells more about Alabama than it does the Citadel. I mean, it was impressive, yes, but it's a triple option offense, not something that a lot of teams run, and not something that a lot of teams that Bama plays ever do. So
yeah,
I think it was just kind of an outlier. I wouldn't look too much into it.
So you're not taking away, there aren't any new concerns? Because I feel like now, Evan, the disparity between Alabama and, because here's the thing, okay, just for a second. I have been critical of Clemson because of their seemingly ability, their recurring ability to play down to their opponents. No matter who they're playing, they always seem to play down to their opponents. Now, there are some games like Wake Forest where they just completely blow it out of the park, but more often than not, Clemson's in a tight football game, and that's why I've been critical of them in the past, whereas Alabama, they just blow everyone away, no questions asked. So, I don't know. I feel like now, Evan, that the disparity between Alabama and Clemson and almost the rest of the field shrinks a little bit. Am I crazy for thinking that, or does this prove that Alabama's weak? They have a weakness.
I'm gonna go kind of in the middle of the two extremes here, because Bradley's saying not to worry about this game taken into account. You're saying that, hey, this proves that Alabama's not as good as we thought they were. I'm gonna go somewhere in the middle, because I think Alabama is still, by a significant margin, the best team in the country. But I think we can use this game as an example of how to beat Bama, because the Citadel threw 2 passes and completed 0 of them. So they put up 275 yards on the ground, and they scored 17 more points than Mississippi State and LSU combined. So I think this gives us an opportunity to say, okay, well, Alabama's pretty vulnerable to the run, so if you can establish the run game and not make a whole lot of mistakes, that could be your key to success, because the Citadel didn't make many mistakes.
You limited their time of possession. Alabama's offense was almost never on the field the first half, and so it really, like you said, was until the second half where they were finally able to get the offense out on the field and flex their muscles, so to speak, and put some points up on the board. I still think that's just one of these things. When I went back and looked at this game, I was like, wait a second, I've always been kind of critical of Clemson because of them not being able to pull away from opponents that are far less talented, and here Alabama did the same thing, and it's not something we usually see from Alabama, Bradley. I think that's my point.
Yeah, and I think this kind of reminds me of the Army-Oklahoma game earlier in the year. We know Oklahoma's capable against pretty much every other team in America of putting up at least 40 points, maybe take out Clemson and Michigan and Alabama. So I think it was a little bit of an outlier. Like I said, just kind of a different offense. And I think we're going to see a lot more from Bama this weekend against Auburn that can really start to give us more of an idea of where these teams are going to go into the playoffs. So I think right now we'd all still pick Alabama to beat Auburn and Georgia and be that 1 seed in the playoffs. But you're right. I think the gap is slowly closing, but like Evan said, not 100% closed yet.
All right, well, let's switch gears over to the game that everybody wants to talk about. It's South Carolina Hate Week here at Clemson. The Tigers are going to be taking on South Carolina this weekend in Death Valley, 7 p.m. kickoff for the 107th consecutive meeting all-time. It's, 116? 117 all time? I know it's 107th consecutive. Not sure.
115 total meetings, and the series has been uninterrupted since 1909.
So it is 116th all time meeting?
This will be, yeah. Yes. We've met 150 times, sorry. Yeah.
And this, right now, the spread has Clemson favored by basically 4 touchdowns. 26.5 is the spread. However, I do think it's interesting, not that you should read into this too much, but I think it's interesting that Jake Bentley has more passing yards than Trevor Lawrence. He's thrown 19 touchdowns. Lawrence has thrown 21. Bentley has a handful more completions. They're essentially identical. Bentley is 177 for 272. Trevor Lawrence is 173 for 266. Bentley's thrown for 2,244 yards, and then Trevor Lawrence has thrown for 2,095 yards. So very similar statistics. Then
if you want to look into it, though, Trevor's played like half a season
And-
because he didn't become the starter till the sixth game of the year.
Yeah.
And he was only playing, in substitute second half minutes or in splitting time with Kelly Bryant. So
the numbers really don't.
I don't think so. If anything, that makes Jake Bentley look worse, which he doesn't need that. So,
well, I think also too, you look at Brian Edwards, the leading receiver for the Gamecocks, and he's got a few more yards. Again, basically the same. 659 yards receiving on 42 receptions. T. Higgins for Clemson's got 43 receptions for 624. So very, very similar numbers. I think the point I'm trying to get at here is that the biggest discrepancy on the field is Clemson's defense against South Carolina's defense, not Clemson's offense against South Carolina's offense. Do you agree with that?
I would because, Clemson's offense, yes, is better than South Carolina, but, talking gaps like we were about Alabama, I think the gap in between the talent levels of South Carolina's offense and Clemson's offense is much closer than the talent level between South Carolina's defense and Clemson's defense. And you can just look at the numbers and figure that out. I mean, yards per game, South Carolina gets about 430, Clemson gets about 520. So, you're pretty close there. But then when you look at the defensive side of the ball, South Carolina also gives up 400 yards, whereas Clemson only gives up 250. And I think the biggest two numbers that I think are going to, have the biggest impact this Saturday, yards rushing allowed. South Carolina gives up 190 yards on the ground a game. Clemson averages 250 rushing yards a game. So for me, yes, I think Trevor Lawrence has more talent than Jake Bentley, and I think he's going to throw the ball better than Jake Bentley. And we've seen that Jake Bentley cannot play against Clemson no matter how much smack he wants to talk. But I think Travis Etienne and, Lynn J. Dixon, Adam Choice, Tavian Feaster, I think the Clemson backfield is going to have a great game. I think that we're going to win the game on the ground first. And then, if for some reason we struggle, then you let Trevor open her up. But I think you're going to see a big rushing performance by Clemson. I think it's going to be very similar to the Wake Forest game. When we had three guys over 100 yards and with at least a touchdown each, I think it's going to look pretty similar to that.
Bradley, I'm curious, what's your analysis of this matchup?
Don't even try to compare Jake Bentley to Trevor Lawrence. Are you kidding me? I was trying my best not to come through the phone and strangle you for that. Jake Bentley, his stats right now, he played against Georgia, 269 yards, a touchdown and 2 picks. Played against Kentucky, 148 yards, a touchdown and 3 picks. And the Florida game, he did a little better, had 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. But any of the good defense he's faced this year, he's been abysmal. He has not been that good at all. And I'd fully anticipate no different than what we've seen the last couple of years out of Jake Bentley against Clemson this time around. And Evan, I love that stat where you had about the rushing defense. They're 93rd in the country right now, and Clemson's in the top 10 right now in rushing offense. So if Clemson's able to ground and pound and get Travis Etienne going, attack maybe on the outside.
There have been games where Etienne has not been effective on the ground though. So you do have to, yes, I agree from a talent standpoint, Trevor Lawrence is the superior quarterback, Bradley. But at the same time, there have been instances where Clemson struggled to get the ground game going.
Yeah, fine. We'll just pass the ball then. They rank in the 60s in passing yards allowed. So, and they're ranked like almost dead last in FBS and sacks. So. That D-line, I'm not worried about at all when it comes to stopping the run or the pass. And I think, with Jake Bentley in the past, he just hasn't performed well under pressure. Clemson's number 1 in the country in sacks, and we know what that D-line is capable of. I don't see Bentley, getting comfortable throws. I don't think that offense is able to move the ball well at all. I don't think South Carolina's breaking more than 14 points, and I don't see how they are going to hold Clemson to anywhere near 14 points. So I think this game's a wash. 28 points, they might even cover that. I could see Clemson winning this game 47-17. I don't think it's going to be close.
I don't think anyone, even a lot of my South Carolina friends growing up in Lexington, about 15 minutes from USC's campus, I don't think anyone in their right mind is picking South Carolina for this game, Evan.
No.
It's more, are they, we actually talked about this before we went on air because we were talking about Will Muschamp, and this is his second full season now at South Carolina, and putting the pieces in place to get back to, because again, a lot of people, that selective memory forget that if we win this game on Saturday, in the last 10 years, this series is tied 5-5. So there was a point not too many years ago where they had our number. And you look at the performance of Clemson, even when they played in Death Valley, it was abysmal. We choked against them. Now, yes, historically, Clemson has a significant edge in the rivalry, but I think the only real conversation around this game, Evan, is Will Muschamp getting better? Is he building the program? Yes, no, maybe? To be determined?
I would say to be determined because you don't have a lot of evidence right now to back up whether he's doing good or bad.
You have the Georgia game. They lost 41-17. You have the Kentucky game. They lost 24-10. You have the Texas A&M game. They lost 26-23. You have the Florida game. They lost 35-31. So every ranked team they've played, they've lost. And Clemson's a great measuring stick because they're one of the best teams in the country.
Right, and I think that's where you see the disparity in this rivalry since Muschamp took over, and even before then, because for those 5 years that South Carolina was winning, they were dominating us, and they were a top 10 team in the country, but they didn't have, as significant postseason wins as Clemson does. So you're seeing the rise of Clemson and kind of the fall of South Carolina, which is a good thing for us that both of these are coming at the exact same time. And I think Clemson at its best now is still significantly better than South Carolina was at its best, with Connor Shaw and with Steve Spurrier, still at the helm winning, 5 in a row against Clemson. The gap was still smaller than it is now because, there's no secret that, Clemson is far and away a much better team than South Carolina, and Clemson on its worst day is still probably going to beat South Carolina on its best day. If not, the game's going to be very close. So it's not a matter of is Clemson going to win, it's a matter of how many is Clemson going to win by.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably going to ring true, at least in this rivalry game, for the next several years because Muschamp has got such an uphill battle. It's kind of like Gus Malzahn having to recruit against Nick Saban in the same state against one of the best teams in the country, and I just don't think Will Muschamp and South Carolina are capable of that right now.
Here's the thing, Bradley. If South Carolina keeps this game closer than the 56-7 game our sophomore year 2 years ago, if the final score is closer than that, in my opinion, that's a win. That's because you're improving. You have to use this game as a measuring stick because we've looked at their other ranked opponents that they've played this season. They've lost all those games. So if they're able to keep it within 49 points, is that not an improvement?
No, it's not an improvement at all because we could win 55-8, and that's still less, but it's not even close to where they want to be. No, Will Muschamp, they were 9-4 last year. Everyone had them winning 10, 11 games this year, competing for a division title. South Carolina's won one SEC East title in 27 years. You could say they beat us those 5 times, but when they've only had one conference championship in the history of their program, that was the 1969 ACC championship game. No, they're nowhere close to Clemson. I don't care if this game is within 3 points. Their program is still nowhere near where Clemson is right now.
How dare you talk down to the Outback Bowl champions like that? Don't you know how many times they've made the Outback Bowl? How rude of you.
I feel like I'm honestly listening to the hater hotline here. Somebody's calling in and roasting me for having the audacity to give South Carolina a fair shake. Quickly, Bradley, we got to cut to break. Give me your score prediction for this game.
47-17. I think that's my final score, 47-14, somewhere in there. I think it's a 30-point margin. I think we're going to cover the spread, and I think South Carolina definitely does not score more than 20. So I'll go 47-17.
If there was ever a game that Dabo was going to abandon his humanity and run the score up in a Nick Saban-esque fashion, this is the game to do it. And if there was ever a game for Christian Wilkins to play quarterback, this is the game to do it. I would love to see, a record set in this game. I would love the score to be, like 63-10 or something like that. I don't really think it's going to happen, so I'm gonna go with we'll say 52 to probably 17, hopefully somewhere in that range.
I'm thinking about the same as you. I've got 49-17. I think that they're going to have like 10 at half, and then they're going to score a touchdown like the last 3 minutes when our fourth string guys are out on the field. So yeah, I think that, like I said, that they're going to have several years of building to get back to where they were just a handful of years ago.
Jay, you're not picking your precious Gamecocks to win?
No, like I said, man, I know we got cut to break, but real quick, I don't really root for Carolina to beat Clemson. I just want them to do well so that when we play them, beating them means something in terms of the larger scope. So that's where I'll leave it. We got to cut to one last break. When we come back, we'll be talking about some of Clemson's achievements the last few years, and then obviously we'll have open phone lines. Again, definitely dial in 864-654-7627. We can't wait to hear from you. That's next.
The beauty of the Clemson Tigers network is that even when they are playing in the Cayman Islands, you still hear every exciting minute. The Clemson Tigers kick off their part in the Cayman Islands Classic November 19th as they take on Akron. Live from Georgetown, Grand Cayman, it's Clemson Tigers basketball right here on the Clemson Tigers Network.
Catch all the action this season right here on the flagship station for Clemson basketball, WCCP 105.5 The Roar.
Here at The Roar, community means everything to us, and our friends at Carolina Alliance Bank feel the exact same way. Here's a real full-service bank that puts community first. They are the community bank you have been looking for. Whether it is for business or personal banking needs, Carolina Alliance offers competitive low rates and personal one-on-one services and the customer care you thought was a thing of the past. Find a local branch at CarolinaAllianceBank.com. Again, that's CarolinaAllianceBank.com. Member FDIC, an equal housing lender.
Bring your own tools, pull your own parts, and save big. It's that easy at LKQ Pick Your Part. This Friday, Saturday, and Sunday at LKQ Pick Your Part. Save 40% on every part on the lot. Pull it off and save. At LKQ Pick Your Part, you can always find new inventory for your car or truck. From transmissions to tires, rims to radiators. Visit LKQ Pick Your Part today and find the part you need. And this Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, save an additional 40% on every part you pull. Log on to LKQPickYourPart.com for a location near you.
Big O Dodge Chrysler Jeep Ram is your local family-owned automotive dealer in the upstate. Life, liberty, and happiness is what we're all about. Big O has a huge inventory of new and used vehicles at the lowest price. Cars, SUVs, minivans, Jeeps, and trucks, new and pre-owned. You name it, we've got it. Trust us to deliver your next vehicle today. Visit us online at bigododge.com or check us out in Greenville under that big American flag on the Motor Mile.
Make your next corporate party or team building event one to remember with Local Q. Featuring a wide-ranging menu of mouth-watering, in-house smoked barbecue, signature craft cocktails, 25 rotating drafts, and hundreds of classic games to play. Local Q is the place to break the ice with coworkers, friends, and family. We'll craft you the perfect menu featuring all of the Local Q favorites, whether for 50 people or 250. Local Q has the room for you. Reserve your venue today by visiting localq.com.
M&L Mobile Home Supplies is the largest retail mobile home parts store in the upstate. They're your source for heat pumps, heating, and air replacement parts, doors, tubs, showers, vinyl windows, skirting, decks, water heaters, everything you need. And they'll install vapor barriers, insulated floors, ductwork, and heat pumps. For 32 years, the staff at M&L Mobile Home Supplies has served the upstate's mobile home needs. M&L Mobile Home Supplies, 1100 28 Bypass in Anderson, or online at mnlsupply.com.
Has your extra bedroom turned into a junk room? Is your garage packed and cluttered? Specializing in junk removal and cleanouts, Absolute Waste Management is there to help. They handle the tough stuff like lifting, loading, and dumping. All you have to do is make the call. They do the rest. Call or text 864-266-7131 for a free estimate today. Make the call, schedule an appointment, and say bye to the junk. It's that easy. 864-266-7131.
Does your South Carolina driver's license or ID have a gold star? If not, make the switch to a Real ID today. You may be eligible to purchase your Real ID online at scdmvonline.com or visit the SCDMV with all required documents to purchase your Real ID before the lines grow. The deadline will be here before you know it, so make sure your ID is a Real ID to board a plane, enter a federal building, or visit a military installation today. More information at scdmvonline.com.
R&R Golf Carts and Power Sports, located in Seneca and Clemson, is a factory-authorized dealer for E-Z-GO and Cushman vehicles. They can fully customize your E-Z-GO cart as well. With 0% financing, now it's easier than ever to own your new E-Z-GO or Cushman vehicle. There's plenty of game day rental packages to choose from as well, so don't miss out this season. Stop by R&R Golf Carts and Power Sports on 123 in Seneca and Clemson Boulevard in Anderson. Online at rrgolfcarts.com.
And now back to
break. We did open up the phone lines, and we now have Clemson Dad on with us. How you doing this evening, Clemson Dad?
I'm good, guys. How are you?
We're doing well. Can't wait to be home for the holidays. Thanksgiving's fast approaching. Ready to eat some turkey.
I hear you. Eat up, right?
That's right.
Yes, sir.
Yep. I heard you guys talking about the Clemson-Carolina game. You know my story. I'm a Carolina fan whose daughter ended up at Clemson, but I think it could get ugly, guys. I really do. I think Clemson could whip them up pretty bad. That's just my take on it. I know the spread's around 30 or something, but I don't know. It could get worse than that.
Oh, it definitely could. I think that's something that, Clemson and Carolina fans fully realize. I think part of it is, and we talked a little bit about this when we were on air and when we were on break, there will come a point in this game where you have to start looking ahead to the ACC championship or the playoff or down the road, and you're going to pull your starters out. So, yeah, the first half, you're going to have your foot on the gas, but there will come a point where Trevor Lawrence is going to come
very
out.
Deep, too, though.
Oh, absolutely. We've seen, stellar play at every position, multiple rows down the depth chart. It's just that they're likely going to score in the first half, maybe a touchdown, maybe a field goal, and then later in the game, they may score a touchdown with a few minutes left on a last-ditch drive. So expect them to get somewhere in the teens, but if Clemson's scoring in the 30s or 40s, it should already be handily, the game should be over.
I agree, but I wouldn't be shocked if it got way up there, but we'll see.
That's what we're hoping for sure.
NFL for a second.
Okay.
I heard there's some bad stuff going on between Rodgers and McCarthy in Green Bay. They're not getting along too well. That team seems to be in shambles.
Tell you the truth, I haven't been as up to date with everything in the NFL this season, just because of the Panthers and how I get a cardiac arrest every time I try and watch a Panthers football game. But yeah, I don't know. This seems to be somewhat similar to what's going on right now in Oakland and John Gruden, Derek Carr. Obviously, there's a lot of tension going on in Oakland. I think they're 2-8 now, Evan. Oakland is
something bad. That sounds right there.
But Clemson Dad was specifically asking about Aaron Rodgers and the drama that's been going on in Green Bay. What is Green Bay's record right now? I don't know off the top of my head.
Not as good as it should be.
Are they sub 500?
They won. It's no. I think they're 4-3. I don't know.
Well, they've played more than 7.
They're under 500.
Yeah, they've played more than 7 games. I don't know if they have 5, 6 wins.
4 and 5, maybe.
Possibly somewhere around there. Yeah, I mean, Aaron Rodgers is one of those guys where he's an elite.
And they had a tie as well, if I remember right.
Did the Packers have a tie?
They do. They're 4-5-1. They tied. I think it was the Vikings, wasn't it?
Because the Vikings have a tie.
The Vikings have a tie as well. Yeah, so they're a game under 500, I guess, technically. 4-5-1. They're third in the NFC North. So.
Almost 500.
Yeah, struggling. Struggling.
Yeah. I don't know. I think right now, at least within the NFC, it's the Rams conference to lose.
Rams and Saints there at the top.
Saints, that's true.
Everybody else is fighting for third.
Oh, I hate when the Saints are good.
Yeah,
I was going to say the Saints. That was another one of my comments. The Saints look really good.
Yeah.
They looked really good yesterday, too.
They did, yeah.
Yeah, they've been looking good. All right, well, I ended on this. If you guys are interested, Jerry said he'd sell the Cowboys for $10 billion if you got the cash.
Ooh, let me break out the lemonade stand real quick. We'll turn that into Evan's World down there in Dallas-Fort Worth.
I think we can break out some
I just thought that was funny. I mean, they estimated the financial people out there in the world that the team was worth $5 billion, but Jerry said he wouldn't take less than 10. So
he might have to settle if he really wants to get rid of it.
Settling for $5 billion. Can you imagine settling for $5 billion? I want to say the Panthers were sold by Jerry Richardson for around $2 billion.
Something like that.
It was a couple $1 billion. I can't even fathom selling a team.
I wouldn't even know
$5 billion.
If I had to write down the number $5 billion, I don't even know how many zeros I would put. Like that's how foreign that large of a number is to me. I just don't even know.
Yeah, that is something. But $10 million, that's more than I can
I'll say it's probably the best thing that could happen to the Cowboys, in my opinion.
Yeah, really?
Yeah.
That's a whole other conversation.
Jerry's a pretty interesting owner. He definitely he makes me pay attention to the Cowboys, that's for sure.
I just think he micromanages too much, man.
Yeah, well, I didn't think you see that sometimes, even with head coaches in college football. But hey, Clemson Dad, we really appreciate you taking the time. Call in, talk with us.
Enjoy it, guys.
Thanks. Appreciate it. All right, let's switch back now because we still have Bradley on hold with us on the phone line. So we've got Bradley back.
He's still here. He hadn't hung up yet. Go eat dinner or something,
Longest phone call in AFR history. All right, so quickly here, we got 6 minutes left, and I know Bradley wants to talk about some of the other rivalry games this coming weekend. We will get to those here in a couple minutes. Evan, let's start here because we have a couple minutes. We're going to have to be quick.
Okay.
Last 4 years. Freshman year, we go 14-0, play Alabama in the championship, and we lose that game, finished 14-1. Sophomore year, we had the singular loss to Pitt at home, 43-42, I believe. Tough. Went on to win the national championship. We were 14-1 to finish the season. Junior year, this past year, had a loss to Syracuse on the road Friday night. Then a loss in the semifinal to Alabama, 6-24. Finished that season 12-2. And then this year, possibly going to go undefeated 2 years, to have 2 undefeated regular seasons in the last 4 years. Clemson is 51-4. The senior class is 51-4. Alabama's senior class was 53-5, I believe. So if Clemson wins this game against South Carolina, they win the ACC championship and they advance to the college football playoff and the semifinal game, they'll have the undisputed best senior class, most wins in college football history. So does that mean that this is the greatest 4 years of any team ever?
Well, there's no doubt that it's the greatest 4 years of Clemson football ever by a significant margin. And I think Dabo's harped on that and made a point of saying, like, hey, look at the come up and we're still not done kind of thing. As far as the best 4 years of any college football team ever, that's a tougher argument to make. But let's say Clemson runs the table, wins out, wins the national championship on an undefeated season to become the first team ever to go 15-0. I think that's a substantial argument that you could make. Again, it might be an uphill battle trying to argue that out, but there's definitely a case for it.
Here's what I'm going to say before I turn it over to Bradley because I want to hear his thoughts. If Clemson goes on to win the national championship this year, obviously we would finish ranked number 1. We started the season ranked 2nd. That means that this would be the 8th straight year that Clemson would finish the season ranked higher than where it began. Obviously, the only way that happens this year is if we win the whole shebang.
So you got to win out for that to happen too. You stumble against South Carolina or Pitt.
So
those
Bradley,
dreams are dashed.
if we finish 15-0, we've won a national championship, 2 in the last 4 years. We made it to 4 straight college football playoffs, 4 straight ACC championships, 2 undefeated regular seasons. We've bested our final poll 8 straight years. Is that the best 4 years in history?
I think so. I think if we don't, you still got to give it to Bama between 2009 and 2012. They won 3 out of 4 national championships. Now that you could argue that was during the BCS system, so it was a little.
I think we lost Bradley.
Oh, thank God, he's gone.
I'm not. Yeah, I think we lost Bradley. So yeah, I mean,
he was making a good point though.
He was Alabama from, he said 2009 to 2012.
Yeah.
I see him.
I believe he's calling back.
He's buzzing back in. I'm not sure. We only have a couple minutes left, so I don't think we'll be able to get back to him this ening.
Sorry, Bradley.
Yeah, I mean, Evan, realistically, and I know that there is some bias because we are students. I think a lot of times, especially myself included, we don't appreciate what we have right now and how. I mean, we go to games that we just expect to win. Like, we're talking about South Carolina. We're just like, okay, we're going to win. Are we going to win by 20 or are we going to win by 30?
Yeah, and I'm talking about being mad if we win by less than 20.
Yeah.
Like,
5 years ago, we couldn't beat them.
Oh, yeah, and you and I both know because we grew up watching Clemson football in the mid-2000s with a bunch of those do-nothing quarterbacks after Whitehurst that, if we won the Music City Bowl, we were ecstatic around here.
A bowl game is a big deal.
Yeah, and now it's like, oh, my God, if we don't make the playoff, what are we going to do? Like, heaven help us if we have to play a New Year's Six Bowl.
A New Year's Six would be a disappointment.
It would be, and that's the culture that Dabo has established over his last 10 years as being head of the program. This is what he's brought to us, and this is the level that this team is on now and the level that they're going to stay on as far as I'm concerned, because at this point, I think you've seen the recruiting, the talent development. I think Clemson has the ability to hang at the top, with the likes of teams that are always good, like Bama and Ohio State and, maybe even Michigan to an extent now if Harbaugh can figure it out. And, Georgia is coming on recently. So I think Clemson has what it takes to sustain this level of success that they've had.
No, I don't disagree with that at all. And I think it's going to be, I think Clemson actually has a chance. The most wins by a single team in a row all time is Clemson from 1934 to 1940 with 7 straight games. I think that they could possibly, if things keep trending and they keep pace with where they're at and Carolina keeps having to rebuild, they could pass that 7 mark. It could happen. I'm not sure.
For sure. It'll be fun to watch this weekend.
We're out of time. Always fun bringing you another edition of After Further Review. Have a great Thanksgiving. For Evan, Bradley, myself, we'll see you next time.